Hi guys men. Thank you for watching these videos. Subscribe to the channel to not miss new videos. So, here's the situation. Last night was one of those seemingly perfect dates. I took my girlfriend to this cozy little Italian spot, the kind of place where we could just chill and talk for hours. We laughed, shared a bottle of wine, and everything felt good. Afterward, I walked her to her door, gave her a kiss, and sent her on her way, feeling like I was the luckiest guy. But of course, things can never be that simple, right? I jump into my car, head home, and no more than 5 minutes down the road, my engine starts making weird noises. Then, the smoke begins to pour out from under the hood. I pull over, pop the hood, and I'm instantly hit with the smell of burning rubber and the sight of steam rising like some sort of horror movie. It was getting late, and there was no chance in hell I could get a mechanic to come out to the middle of nowhere at this hour. So, in a moment of desperation, I called my girlfriend. Yeah, it might sound crazy, but I wasn't about to sit on the side of the road all night. I tell her what happened, and she's all concerned, asking if I'm okay. I'm like, yeah, but my car is basically a ticking time bomb. Then I ask if I can crash at her place for the night, expecting her to be a little surprised, but she just says, sure, no problem. It was sweet of her, really. But here's where things took an unexpected turn. Her dad shows up on his bike at, like, 11:30 p.m. to pick me up. I don't know why, but that felt like a weird flex. I mean, I wasn't expecting to be rescued by her dad, especially not at that hour. But, hey, I didn't have much of a choice, so I hopped in the back of his truck, and we drove off. This would end up being a much bigger deal than I ever thought. The night was awkward, to say the least. I didn't exactly plan on spending the night in my girlfriend's house, especially not under these circumstances. Her dad was kind enough to give me a bed in the guest room, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Like, I was crashing at her place because my car decided to break down, and that's just weird. Anyway, I managed to fall asleep, though not for long. The morning came way too quickly. When I woke up, I was still processing the fact that I had crashed at my girlfriend's place unexpectedly. Her dad had already gone out and was doing his thing. He was up early, that's for sure. He didn't even seem that bothered by it, which was strange considering how awkward it felt for me. When I got downstairs, I didn't expect much, maybe breakfast or a quick, hey, sorry for the trouble. But then, I saw it. My car. It was sitting right there, in front of the house. My eyes couldn't believe it. The thing that had been smoking on the side of the road last night was now perfectly parked in her driveway. The hood was up, but there was no smoke, no sign of distress. I looked at her dad, who was sipping his coffee like it was nothing. I went back out last night, he said. Didn't take much to fix it, but it was a pain to get it off the road. Figured you'd need it for the drive home. I was honestly blown away. It wasn't just that he fixed it. It was that he had driven out into the night, worked on my car, and brought it back for me. That's not something I expected, not from anyone. I could barely get my own dad to do half that much for me. It was weird, too. It was kind of like I'd earned some secret badge of approval just by being stuck on the side of the road. Maybe I had just won her dad over, and that was a win for me. But, of course, things weren't as smooth as they seemed. It wasn't going to stay simple for long. The next few days felt like some sort of weird dream. I kept telling myself I was just grateful that her dad had fixed my car, but honestly, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in my relationship with her. Maybe it was because her dad had gone above and beyond to help me, but there was this sense that I had moved into a new tier in their eyes. Like I'd been tested in some way, and, well, I passed. At least, I thought I did. Things were going well for the next couple of days. I called her to thank her dad, and he was cool about it, totally casual, like it was no big deal. But then, out of nowhere, something changed. We started talking about future plans, nothing too serious, just casual stuff. At some point, I mentioned how nice it was to have her dad's approval, especially after the car fiasco. She chuckled, but there was something off about it. I couldn't put my finger on it, but her reaction felt distant, like she wasn't fully engaged in the conversation. Later that day, I got a text from her asking if I could meet her at the park. It was random, but I didn't think much of it. When I got there, I saw her sitting on a bench, looking a little tense, like she was waiting for something. She waved me over with a small smile, but there was a coldness behind her eyes. I walked up to her, and the moment I sat down, she dropped a bombshell. "I need to talk to you about something." You know how you get that feeling when you just know something's coming? That pit in your stomach that makes you wish you could just turn around and walk away? Yeah, that feeling hit me hard in that moment. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about everything lately. About us." My heart started to race. Was she breaking up with me? Was she having second thoughts about our relationship? Is everything okay? I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. She looked at me for a long moment, and then her expression shifted. It was like she wasn't even looking at me anymore. It was like she was seeing through me. Then, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been talking to someone else. It's complicated." My mind went blank. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I was sitting there, next to her, hearing her words but not fully processing them. "Talking to someone else?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. My mind was spinning, and I was having trouble keeping up. The first thing that hit me was how out of nowhere it all seemed. We had just been doing fine, everything seemed normal, so what the hell was this? She nodded, looking down at her hands, avoiding eye contact. "It's not what you think," she started, but it was too late for that. What I thought wasn't the issue anymore, what she had just said was. I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who? When did this start?" She hesitated, then looked at me, her eyes a mixture of guilt and something I couldn't quite place. "It started a few weeks ago. I wasn't sure where things were going with us, and then I just met him. We've been talking, and I don't know, I just felt like he understood me more." My stomach twisted into knots. I was trying to process the words, but it was like I was hearing them from another person. This wasn't the girl I thought I knew. It wasn't the girl who I had been seeing for months, the one who made me laugh, the one who I thought was on the same page as me. "You've been seeing him behind my back?" I asked, the anger starting to creep into my voice, despite my best efforts to stay calm. She shook her head quickly. "No, it's not like that. It's just we've been talking a lot, and I felt like we connected more. I didn't want to hurt you." "Well, congratulations." "You just did," I replied, bitterness flooding my words before I could stop myself. She didn't respond to that, just stared at her shoes, her face reddening. It was as if she was waiting for me to understand her side of things, like I was supposed to feel sympathy for her complicated situation. I tried to hold it together, but it was hard. There was this overwhelming mixture of betrayal, confusion, and disbelief. I didn't know whether to be angry or just completely devastated. "You're telling me that you've been emotionally involved with someone else while we've been together?" I asked, more for confirmation than anything else. Her eyes flickered briefly with shame, but she didn't deny it. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I thought I could handle both. I couldn't make sense of it." My mind was reeling, and I felt like I was suffocating. I had trusted her, hell, I had trusted her dad, too. I just spent the night under his roof, thinking I had been accepted into their world, and now this? It was a betrayal on a whole different level. I had to leave before I said something I would regret. "I need to think," was all I could manage to say before I stood up and walked away. As I drove back to my place, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being left with the scraps of a relationship I thought was solid. And in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about what her dad might think if he knew what was really going on. The next few days were like walking through a fog. I couldn't really focus on anything, my mind just kept replaying that conversation over and over. The hurt, the betrayal, it all seemed too much to process. The worst part was how silent everything had become. She hadn't reached out, hadn't apologized, nothing. It was like I didn't exist anymore. I tried calling her a couple of times, but the texts I sent were short, cold. She would respond, but it was like she was avoiding the real conversation. She was giving me just enough to keep me hanging on, but never enough to feel like we were actually going to work through this. I needed answers. I needed closure, or at least something to give me a sense of where we stood. So, I decided to go see her, face to face. When I showed up at her place, her dad was sitting on the porch, working on some project. He looked up when I walked up the steps and gave me a half smile. "Hey there. Everything okay?" I forced a smile back, trying not to think about what had happened between his daughter and me. "Yeah, just here to talk to her." He nodded and stepped aside, gesturing for me to go in. It was a little awkward having to walk into the house knowing what was going on, knowing what she had done. But there I was, trying to keep things civil. She was in the living room, sitting on the couch, looking like she had been waiting for this. The moment I walked in, her eyes met mine, but there was no warmth there. No apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just a cold, guarded look that made my chest tighten. "You wanted to talk?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel the anger bubbling up again. She nodded, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Yeah, I think we need to figure out what happens next." "What happens next?" I repeated, incredulous. "You've been talking to someone else behind my back, and now you want to talk about what happens next? Do you even understand how much you've hurt me?" Her face twisted slightly, and she shook her head. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't plan for it to go this far. I was confused, okay? I didn't know what I wanted. You can't just expect me to be perfect." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I couldn't let her get away with this. "You don't get to blame me for this. You were the one who was talking to someone else, lying to me. You're the one who made this decision." She stood up, her eyes defensive. "I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you. But I didn't want to lose you, either. I didn't know what else to do." I stared at her, still trying to process everything. Was she really trying to justify it? Was she expecting me to just accept her excuses and move on? I didn't know what to do, what to feel, what to believe anymore. "You should have been honest with me from the start," I finally said, my voice breaking just slightly. "You should have told me you were confused before everything got this messed up." "I didn't know how," she shot back. "I thought maybe I could fix it. Maybe things would just get better on their own, but they didn't. I couldn't take it anymore." I turned and walked out the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't want to hear any more of her excuses. As I stepped outside, I saw her dad standing by the truck, watching me. He didn't say anything, just gave me a look, as if he knew what had just gone down. I didn't know if I was supposed to talk to him about it, but I couldn't. Not yet. I was too angry, too hurt. I got in my car, slammed the door, and drove off, feeling the weight of everything crash down on me. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted her, let my guard down, only for her to betray me like this? And yet, part of me still wanted answers. Still wanted to make sense of what had happened. The next couple of days were a blur. I barely left my apartment. I didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to talk to anyone. Every time I tried to focus on something, work, even just reading a book, my mind kept drifting back to her. To the conversation. To the betrayal. To the empty feeling that had taken over my chest. I kept replaying her words in my mind. "I didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt you. But every time I thought about it, I just couldn't understand. If she didn't want to hurt me, why didn't she just tell me? Why keep it a secret? Why go behind my back with someone else?" The excuses felt thin, hollow, and I wasn't sure if I was angrier at her or at myself for not seeing it sooner. I tried to reach out to her once or twice, but each time she either ignored my calls or gave me these vague, unsatisfying responses. Part of me still wanted to fix things, to have the relationship we once had. But every time she answered with her excuses, it felt more and more like she didn't really care about what had happened between us. Then, out of nowhere, I got a message from her dad. I didn't know what to think when I saw it. I had no idea what he was going to say, or if he even knew what had happened between his daughter and me. We hadn't spoken about it. Hell, I had tried to avoid him ever since that day, but I couldn't just ignore it. The message was simple: we need to talk. I wasn't sure what to make of it. Why would he want to talk to me about this? Did he know what had happened? Was he going to tell me that I was overreacting, that I should just forgive her? I didn't know, but I knew I needed to at least hear him out. I agreed to meet him. When I showed up at his place, he was sitting on the porch again, this time with a coffee in hand, looking calmer than I expected. He nodded as I walked up, but there was a weight to his eyes, something that told me he knew more than he was letting on. "Sit down," he said, motioning to the chair beside him. I'd been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. I sat, but I was on edge. I had no idea where this conversation was going to go. "I know what happened between you and my daughter," he started, bluntly. "She's not the easiest person to talk to right now, but I figured I'd be the one to say it. I'm sorry. I should have known something was off, but I didn't." My heart dropped. Did he really just apologize to me? I wasn't expecting that at all. I thought he'd side with her, tell me I was overreacting or that it wasn't such a big deal. But here he was, owning up to something I never thought would happen. "I don't know what's going on with her," he continued, "but I want you to know that I've got your back. If you need anything, I'm here. I know this is a mess, and I'm sorry you got caught in the middle of it." It was hard to process. His words weren't what I expected. I thought he'd be angry at me for causing problems, but instead, he was offering his support. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I didn't even know I had been carrying. Maybe this wasn't just about her anymore. Maybe this was about me, too. "I appreciate that," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I don't know what to do anymore. She's lied to me. She's been seeing someone else behind my back. How am I supposed to trust her again?" He sighed, looking down at his coffee. "I don't have all the answers, kid. But sometimes, people make mistakes. And sometimes, they don't know how to fix them until it's too late. I don't know if I can forgive her," I said, the weight of the words hitting me harder than I expected. It felt like I was admitting defeat, like I was waving the white flag of surrender before I even had the chance to fight for what was left of our relationship. "That's okay," he said quietly. "You don't have to forgive her if you don't want to. But you've got to do what's right for you. Don't let anyone, not even her, make you feel like you owe them anything." That was the first time in days that I felt a sense of clarity. I didn't know if I was ready to walk away completely, but I knew I wasn't obligated to stay in something that felt wrong. I wasn't obligated to forgive someone just because they wanted me to. We sat in silence for a while, neither of us knowing what to say next. I wasn't sure if this conversation made things better or worse, but it gave me something I hadn't had in a long time: perspective. Maybe the hardest part wasn't her cheating on me. Maybe the hardest part was realizing that I had to make a decision for myself, without relying on anyone else's approval. After my conversation with her dad, I felt like I was finally starting to see things clearly. It wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't about trying to fix something that had been broken beyond repair. It was about me. About what I needed, what I was willing to accept, and what I wasn't. I spent the next few days in a kind of emotional limbo. I went to work, I hung out with friends, but I still couldn't shake the feeling of everything being off. Every time I saw her face or thought about our past together, it felt like a memory that wasn't mine anymore. It was like I was trying to recall something I once believed in, but the more I thought about it, the less it made sense. She texted me a few times, asking to talk, but each time I hesitated. I wasn't sure what I even wanted to say to her. What was there left to say? She had already made her choice, and I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to handle whatever excuses or empty promises she'd throw my way. Finally, after a few days of back and forth, I agreed to meet her. But I wasn't going to let things drag out any longer. I needed to know, once and for all, where we stood. No more games. No more waiting for the other person to make the first move. When I showed up at her place, she was sitting on the porch, looking more tired than usual. Her eyes were red, like she hadn't been sleeping, and her hair was a little messy. She looked like someone who had been up all night, but maybe she wasn't just losing sleep over the breakup. Maybe it was the guilt that was keeping her awake. "Hey," she said quietly when I walked up. There was no warmth in her voice anymore, just a kind of resignation that I wasn't sure I felt for her. I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. "We need to talk. For real this time." She nodded, her lips trembling slightly. "I know." We both stood there for a moment, not really sure how to begin. It felt like the end of something important, but neither of us wanted to admit it. "I can't keep doing this," I said finally, my voice steady but firm. "I can't keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not. I trusted you, and you broke that trust. I don't know if I can get past that." She opened her mouth to say something, but I held up a hand. "Please don't make excuses. I don't want to hear it. I've heard enough. You've had your chance to be honest, and now I need to figure out what's best for me." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel bad. I didn't know if I was supposed to feel guilty, but I didn't. I wasn't the one who had lied, who had broken the trust. This wasn't about me trying to make her feel better. This was about me protecting myself. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was confused." "Confused?" I repeated, incredulous. "You were talking to someone else behind my back. You knew exactly what you were doing. You just didn't care." "I didn't mean for it to happen," she insisted, her voice cracking. "I didn't want to lose you." "Then you should have been honest with me," I said, my voice louder now. "You should have come to me when you started feeling confused. Instead, you chose to lie. You chose to betray me." She shook her head, her hands trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't know how to fix it once I made the mistake." I stood there for a moment, looking at her. I wanted to feel something, anger, sadness, anything, but all I could feel was numb. I had given her everything, and now I was standing here, watching her fall apart. It felt so wrong. "I don't think I can forgive you," I said finally, my voice more gentle now, but no less firm. "I need something different. I can't keep living like this, wondering if you're lying to me, wondering if you care." Her face crumpled at my words. She looked like she was on the verge of begging, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't go back to being someone I wasn't just to make her feel better. "I think it's time for both of us to move on," I said, my heart pounding in my chest as the words left my mouth. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was what needed to happen. For both of us. She didn't say anything after that. She just stood there, her hands at her sides, looking lost. I didn't want to comfort her. I couldn't comfort her. This wasn't about us anymore. It was about me finding my own peace, even if it meant walking away from someone I thought I would be with forever. As I turned to leave, I glanced back one last time. She was still standing on the porch, her head lowered. I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel good either. I just felt done. Walking away from her that day was one of the hardest things I've ever done. There's something about finally accepting the end of a relationship that feels like a weight lifting off your chest, but also crushing it at the same time. It's this weird mix of freedom and loss that makes you question everything you thought you knew about love, trust, and your own strength. The following week, I focused on keeping my mind occupied. I threw myself into work, started seeing friends I hadn't spoken to in ages, and even went back to the gym, something I'd stopped doing in the last few months because I was so wrapped up in our drama. It felt like a fresh start, but also like the quiet before the storm. I knew things wouldn't stay calm for long. And I was right. A few days later, she showed up at my apartment unannounced. It was around 10 p.m., and I was just about to crash after a long day. When I opened the door, I almost didn't recognize her. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her face pale, and there was a desperation in her that I hadn't seen before. "I need to talk," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I wasn't prepared for this. I thought we were done, that we had both agreed to move on. But there she was, standing in front of me like a ghost from the past, asking for another chance. I don't know what else to say, I said, feeling drained. We've already talked. I told you everything. I can't go back on my decision. She reached for my hand, her fingers cold. Please, she begged. I made a mistake. I wasn't thinking clearly. I thought I could keep everything from falling apart, but I couldn't. I don't want to lose you. I pulled my hand away. You already did, I said, the words stinging more than I expected. You lost me when you chose to lie to me. When you chose someone else over us. Her face crumpled again, and for a split second, I felt a flicker of guilt. I didn't want to see her in pain, but I couldn't let that cloud my judgment. I couldn't let myself go back to being someone who would forgive everything for the sake of avoiding conflict. I know I messed up, she said, tears now streaming down her face. But I love you. I really do. I'll do anything to fix this. I'll make it right. I'll prove to you that I can change. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But in my gut, I knew the truth. People don't change overnight, and trust once broken doesn't just heal with a few words and some tears. She had hurt me deeply, and I couldn't just pretend it didn't matter. I can't, I said, my voice firm this time. I can't trust you again. I can't keep living like this, waiting for you to hurt me again. There was a long silence between us, one that felt like it lasted forever. She didn't speak, didn't move. It was like she was frozen in place, trying to process the reality of what I was saying. And then, just like that, she turned and walked away. That was the last time I saw her. In the days that followed, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel happiness. I felt empty. It's strange how a breakup can leave you feeling like a piece of you is missing, even when you know deep down that it was the right choice. But I also knew it wasn't just her I was mourning. It was the version of myself that I had lost along the way, someone who had been so willing to sacrifice for someone else's happiness, someone who had trusted too easily. I spent a lot of nights thinking about what could have been different. Maybe if I had caught the signs earlier, maybe if I had confronted her sooner. But the reality was, I didn't have the power to change the past. And beating myself up over it wouldn't do me any good. I had to move forward. But that didn't mean it was going to be easy. She tried to reach out to me a few more times over the next couple of weeks, texts, calls, even a letter, but I never responded. I knew it was over. I had to stop holding on to something that was never truly mine to begin with. It wasn't about getting closure from her, it was about finding it within myself. As time passed, I began to rebuild. I started focusing on what made me happy again, things I had neglected for months, even years. I traveled, spent time with family, and began focusing on my own well-being instead of worrying about fixing someone else's mistakes. I learned that the most important relationship I had was the one I had with myself. And slowly, I started to heal. In the end, I realized that sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that lead to the most growth. Walking away wasn't a sign of weakness, but of strength. I didn't need to chase after someone who had shown me their true colors. I didn't need to keep fighting for something that was already broken. And that's the advice I'd give to anyone who finds themselves in a similar situation: don't let someone's lies define who you are. Don't let their mistakes steal your peace. If someone can't see your worth, it's their loss, not yours. And as painful as it might be in the moment, walking away is sometimes the best decision you can make for your future. After everything had settled down and the dust had started to clear, I found myself standing in the middle of a life I didn't fully recognize. Not because of the breakup, because of how much I had let myself fall into someone else's world. I'd become someone I wasn't proud of. The person I had been before the relationship was buried beneath layers of compromise, apologies, and emotional burnout. But when you're alone for the first time in a while, you have nothing to do but reflect. At first, I didn't know where to start. It felt like a blank slate, which is a good thing in theory, but it also feels a little scary. It's overwhelming, like suddenly realizing that you're in charge of your own story again, and it's up to you whether you want to make something good out of the next chapter or not. I started with small things. I dusted off my gym membership and went for runs again. I signed up for a pottery class, something I had always wanted to try but never had the courage to do while I was with her. It felt good to do things just for me. I made time for my friends, something I'd neglected during the relationship. It was like rediscovering parts of myself that I had forgotten about, and that felt liberating. But there were also days when I couldn't escape the lingering doubts. What if I had handled it differently? What if I had given her another chance? What if I hadn't been so quick to walk away? Sometimes, the silence at night felt louder than the noise of the days, and I found myself missing the companionship. Not her specifically, but the idea of having someone there, someone to share life with. There were moments when I'd catch myself wondering if I'd ever truly be happy again, or if I was just going to keep holding on to this idea of the one that got away for the rest of my life. But as I let time pass, I realized something important. Those moments of doubt weren't a sign that I was making a mistake. They were part of the healing process. They were a reminder that I was human, and it was okay to feel conflicted. One night, a few months after the breakup, I met up with a couple of friends at a local bar. We had a good time, catching up on everything that had happened while I was in my relationship fog. As we sat there talking, I realized something significant. I wasn't the only one who had been through a tough breakup. In fact, pretty much everyone had their own horror stories to tell. It was kind of comforting, in a strange way. Not that I wanted anyone to suffer, but knowing that everyone had their own struggles, that they weren't perfect, and that we were all just figuring things out together made me feel less isolated. I started talking about my experience more, and it felt good. Not in a "I need sympathy" kind of way, but in the "I need to get this off my chest" way. And honestly, it helped. I had been holding all of this inside for so long that I didn't even realize how much I needed to share it with someone. A month or so after that night out, I ran into her again. It was completely accidental. She was at a coffee shop with a friend, and I didn't see her until I was already halfway to the counter. My heart did a little jump, but I kept my cool. I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't know if I'd feel anger, sadness, or maybe even regret. But what I felt was indifference. It wasn't bitterness, it wasn't hatred, it wasn't longing. It was just a recognition that we had both moved on, even if she hadn't completely accepted it yet. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but I didn't give her the chance. I smiled and waved, nodded politely, and walked out. I didn't need closure from her. I didn't need any more words. And in that moment, I realized I was free. Free from the weight of that relationship. Free from the need to explain myself to anyone, including her. That was one of the clearest moments of my life. The last thing I needed was for her to think she could just waltz back in after everything had fallen apart. It wasn't about pride. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about reclaiming my life, my happiness, and my self-respect. I didn't need anyone else to validate my decisions. I was the only one who had to live with them. It wasn't easy. The hardest thing was learning to trust myself again. I had let someone in who had hurt me so deeply, and it had shaken my belief in my own judgment. But the more I worked on myself, the more I realized that the only person who could determine my worth was me. And it wasn't dependent on someone else's approval or validation. In the end, I learned that relationships are supposed to bring joy, not a sense of constant fear or anxiety. I'm still figuring out what comes next, but now I know that I'm capable of navigating life without the weight of someone else's emotional baggage. To anyone going through a similar experience, my advice would be this: you are not alone. It's okay to feel hurt, angry, or even confused, but don't let someone else's mistakes define your future. Take the time to heal, and focus on becoming the best version of yourself. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is walk away, even when it's the hardest thing to do. After everything settled down, there was a period of real introspection. I spent a lot of time looking at my life and realizing how much of it I had handed over to someone else. It wasn't just the time I'd spent in the relationship, but the way I had molded myself around her needs, her problems, her emotions. It wasn't until I was on my own again that I realized how much I had lost myself in the process. One thing that really hit me during this time was how little I had focused on my own personal growth. I'd gotten so wrapped up in us that I forgot about me. the last few months, and maybe even the last couple of years, had been about keeping things stable, making compromises, and trying to avoid conflict at all costs. But in doing so, I had compromised my own happiness. It was strange, but it was also freeing. I realized I hadn't been living my life, I'd been living hers, in a way. And now, with that weight lifted, I had the space to finally figure out who I wanted to be and what I really wanted out of life. I took a break from dating. I'd been with her for a while, and I wanted time to heal before jumping into anything new. The idea of a relationship seemed almost foreign to me for a while. Instead, I focused on myself, my goals, my career, my friendships. And honestly, I started feeling like myself again. It was almost like I had been walking around in a fog, and now it was starting to clear up. The most significant change was in my emotional state. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. For the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely at peace. I had let go of the resentment that had built up over time and accepted what had happened. That wasn't to say it didn't hurt anymore, but I had learned to let go of the desire for revenge or closure. And honestly, that was when everything started shifting. I stopped blaming myself for the mistakes I had made in the relationship. I stopped questioning if I was good enough or if I could have done something differently. I realized that sometimes, people just aren't meant to be together, no matter how hard you try. It wasn't a failure on my part, it was just life happening. There was also something empowering about realizing that I could take control of my own happiness. I didn't need her to make me feel whole, or anyone else for that matter. I was enough. I was capable of being happy on my own. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments when I'd catch myself slipping back into old habits, checking my phone for messages I knew wouldn't come, replaying past conversations in my head, wondering what might have been if we had made different choices. But I always stopped myself. I reminded myself that I was healing, and that healing wasn't a straight line. It was messy, unpredictable, and sometimes, it was painful. But each day, I got a little bit stronger. One afternoon, a few months after the breakup, I ran into an old friend I hadn't seen in ages. We grabbed coffee, talked about life, and laughed about things we'd forgotten. That conversation left me with a sense of contentment I hadn't realized I'd been missing. It was nice to talk to someone who knew me before all of this. They didn't judge me. They didn't question my decisions. They just listened. And I realized that, even though I had gone through a rough patch, I was still the same person I had been before. That's when I understood that the best relationships aren't the ones that come with zero conflict or problems, they're the ones that help you grow. Relationships should challenge you, push you to be better, and support you in becoming the person you're meant to be. What I had with her wasn't that. But that didn't mean I wasn't capable of finding it one day. For now, I was focusing on being the best version of myself. I wasn't rushing into anything. I wasn't looking for validation or approval. I had learned to appreciate my own company and, in a strange way, that felt like the greatest victory. In the end, this experience taught me a lot about trust, not just trust in others, but trust in myself. I had to trust myself to make the right choices, even when they were hard. I had to trust myself to walk away from something that wasn't right, and trust that I'd come out stronger on the other side. So, if anyone reading this is in a similar situation, feeling unsure or broken, know that you'll get through it. It won't be easy, and you'll have moments of doubt, but you will heal. And when you do, you'll find a version of yourself that's stronger, wiser, and more resilient than you ever thought possible. Just remember, you deserve to be with someone who values you for who you are, not for the person they want you to be. And above all, you deserve to love yourself first. Because at the end of the day, that's the only love that will never fail you. About a year after everything with her, and after I had really started getting my life back on track, something completely unexpected happened. I was sitting at home on a lazy Saturday afternoon, catching up on my favorite show, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't pick it up, but something told me to answer this time. Hello? There was a slight pause before I heard a voice that I hadn't heard in a while. Hey, it's me. I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I really need to ask you something. My heart sank, and for a moment, I just sat there frozen. It was her. My ex. I hadn't heard from her since the breakup. Sure, I had a few mutual friends who would occasionally mention her in passing, but I had made it a point to keep my distance. The healing process had been long, and I wasn't about to let anything drag me back into that mess. But curiosity got the better of me. What do you need? She let out a shaky breath. It's about something that happened when we were together. Something I never told you. And it's been eating at me. I didn't want to keep it from you, but I didn't know how to tell you then. I felt my stomach tighten. My first instinct was to hang up. To walk away and keep the peace. But something in her voice sounded different than usual, more vulnerable, more remorseful. I didn't know what it was, but I decided to listen. I didn't interrupt her as she told me everything. She started with the details of a situation that happened toward the end of our relationship, a night when she had acted distant, when she'd seemed off. At the time, I chalked it up to stress or maybe just growing apart. But now, she was telling me that it had been something else entirely. She admitted to cheating on me. Not just once, but a few times. She explained how she had been seeing someone else behind my back. And the worst part? She had been trying to get me to believe that the issues we were facing in our relationship were all my fault. That I was the one pushing her away. I had suspected something was off back then, but hearing it straight from her mouth was a punch to the gut. It wasn't the betrayal that stung most, though. It was the manipulation. The fact that she had been telling me one thing while doing another, convincing me I was the problem when she had already moved on. For a moment, all I could do was sit there, staring at the phone in disbelief. I was angry, yes, but mostly, I just felt exhausted. It wasn't the shock of the affair itself. It was the realization that she had never been honest with me about anything. That whole relationship had been built on lies, and that was the hardest part to swallow. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, almost too calm. Why are you telling me this now? I don't know, she said softly. I guess I thought I could keep it buried forever, but I can't. I owe you that much. I'm sorry. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I just needed to be honest with you. I sat there, processing her words. Part of me wanted to scream, to curse her out for everything she had done, for how she had treated me. But I had moved on. I wasn't that angry, hurting person anymore. In fact, I realized that in some strange way, this call gave me closure. I appreciate your honesty, I said, keeping my voice steady. But honestly, I'm not looking for anything from you anymore. I've spent a lot of time healing from everything, and I'm in a better place now. She was quiet for a moment. I could almost hear her regret in the silence, and I almost felt sorry for her. But I had done the work of healing, and I wasn't going to let this call undo that. I understand, she finally said. I just needed to say it. Take care of yourself. And with that, she hung up. I sat there for a while, the weight of everything settling on my chest. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even confused. I felt indifferent. And in a strange way, that was exactly what I needed. It wasn't a grand emotional closure, but it was enough. In that moment, I realized how much I had grown. I had built myself back up from the rubble of our relationship, and now, I was standing tall. I had learned to trust myself, to move forward without looking back, and to never settle for less than what I deserved. That phone call didn't drag me back into the past. Instead, it reminded me of how far I had come. And in that, there was peace. So to anyone who might be in a similar situation, struggling with the past or feeling like they'll never get the closure they deserve, just know this: healing doesn't always come in the way you expect. It doesn't always come from the other person admitting their mistakes. Sometimes, it just comes from you realizing that you've already moved on, and you're better off for it. A few months after that call, I thought I was done with her for good. I had moved on, built a better life for myself, and was even seeing someone new, a woman who had a calm, easy way about her. We were still in the early stages, but it felt right. We laughed together, went on hikes, had easy conversations. It was nothing like the drama and intensity one had with my ex, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in a relationship where I could breathe. But, as is always the case when you think you've left the past behind, the past has a way of sneaking up on you. It was a Wednesday evening, and I was cooking dinner when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door, and there she was, my ex, standing on my doorstep, her eyes tired and red. I froze for a moment. What the hell was she doing here? "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice almost pleading. I didn't even know what to say. The last time I had spoken to her, I had made it clear that I had moved on. That I wasn't interested in rehashing the past or picking up where we left off. But I could see it in her face. She looked like she'd been through something, like she was carrying a heavy weight that she couldn't shake off. I didn't know what it was, but there was a moment where I almost felt bad for her. Almost. "No," I said firmly. "We've talked enough." She stepped forward, her voice softer this time. "Please, just give me a minute. I need to explain something." I looked behind her. Her car was parked on the curb, and there was no one else in sight. I knew she had to have driven herself here, which meant she wasn't just casually passing by. She had come here for a reason, and I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. But part of me also felt like I should let her speak, if only for closure, my closure, not hers. I sighed, stepped aside, and let her in. We sat down in the living room, the silence between us awkward and thick. I could tell she was gathering her thoughts, but the longer she took, the more I wanted her to leave. I didn't want to feel pity for her anymore. I had done enough of that when we were together, and I had paid the price for it. Finally, she spoke. "I need to tell you the truth. About everything. The affair, it wasn't just me. I lied to you about a lot of things, but there was one thing I never told you, and I can't keep it to myself any longer." I stared at her, waiting for her to continue, but she seemed to struggle with the words. "I didn't just cheat on you with him. I've been seeing someone else for a while now, another guy. And I told you it was over with him, but it wasn't. I've been lying about a lot of things. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to stop or how to face the mess I created." My stomach turned. It wasn't just the affair, it was the years of lies. The fact that she had been hiding so much from me, playing me for a fool. I'd been in the dark, and she was just now deciding to unload all of this on me. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why now?" She looked away, the shame in her eyes almost visible. "Because I know I hurt you. I don't want you to think I'm some innocent victim here. I've been living with the guilt of what I did to you, and I can't keep pretending everything's okay. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need to be honest. I owe you that." It was hard to know how to respond. Part of me was still angry, but there was another part of me, an old, naive part, that wanted to comfort her. I fought that feeling back. I wasn't the person who would comfort her anymore. I had done enough of that. "I don't need your apology," I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. "I'm done. We're done. I've moved on, and I've learned to live without the lies. I've learned to live without you." She nodded slowly, almost as if she had expected this response. But there was something in her eyes, something like regret and sorrow, that made my chest tighten. I knew this wasn't easy for her, but it didn't make it any easier for me. "I know," she whispered. I needed you to know. I didn't want you to think you weren't worth more than that. You are. You were." And then, just like that, she stood up, gave me one last look, and walked out the door. I didn't chase her. I didn't try to find some closure that didn't exist. I just closed the door, leaned against it, and let out a long breath. I realized that this was the last piece of the puzzle. The last part of the healing process. I didn't need her anymore, not even for answers. I had already moved on, and this chapter was finally closed. As the days passed, I started to feel a sense of finality I hadn't known before. The lingering questions faded. The anger didn't resurface. I had no interest in anything she had to offer. I had learned to take care of myself, to trust myself again, and that was enough. In some ways, it was almost a relief. A few weeks went by after that visit, and everything seemed to settle back into place. My life was continuing forward, and I found myself more at peace than I had been in a long time. I began to appreciate the small things again: time with my new girlfriend, catching up with friends, spending weekends doing things that made me happy without any lingering shadows of the past. But one thing had changed in me. I started noticing how much clearer everything looked. I wasn't clouded by past drama anymore, and I could finally see how unhealthy my previous relationship had been. The lies, the manipulation, the constant emotional upheaval, it all felt so distant, like a bad dream. And in that clarity, I learned something important about myself. It was around that time when I started reflecting on the things that truly mattered to me. The kind of relationship I wanted, the kind of person I wanted to be. I wasn't interested in rushing into something else. I wasn't looking for validation anymore. What I really wanted was peace, peace in my mind, peace in my heart, and peace in my relationships. My new girlfriend, who had quietly stepped into my life during that difficult period, had been nothing but understanding. I had opened up to her about my past, and she never judged me for it. We took things slow, and I appreciated that more than I realized. There was no pressure. There were no expectations other than mutual respect and kindness. It was healthy. It was easy. I also found that I wasn't afraid anymore, afraid of opening up or being vulnerable. After all the betrayal, I was still capable of trusting. I had learned to trust myself first, and that was the foundation that I built everything else on. One evening, I sat down with my girlfriend and we had one of those conversations you don't plan but need to have. She asked me about my past relationships, and we ended up talking about the mistakes I had made, the things I had learned, and how it had shaped me into the person I was becoming. "I think I understand you more now," she said, her voice warm and sincere. "Not just because of what you've been through, but because of how you've handled it." I looked at her, thankful for her patience. "I think I finally understand myself too," I said, smiling. It was a small but significant moment, a moment of true connection, without the baggage of past mistakes weighing it down. We didn't have to rehash every detail of my old relationship, but we did talk about how it had affected me and why I was so adamant about not repeating the same patterns. I was done with the lies, the manipulation, the toxic dynamics. I was ready for something real, something built on trust and transparency. But then, just when I thought everything was in its right place, I got another unexpected message. This time, it was from one of my old friends, someone who had known me when I was with my ex. "Hey man, I know it's been a while, but I think you should know something. I don't want you to be blindsided." I was immediately on alert. "What's going on?" I replied. "Look, I don't know how to say this, but your ex, she's been talking about you. A lot. And I think she's still not over everything. I know you've moved on, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. It sounds like she's still trying to get closure, or maybe she just wants to make things right. But I don't want you to get dragged back into it if you're not ready." I sat there for a moment, my thumb hovering over the screen as I processed his words. Part of me wanted to respond and tell him not to worry. I had made it clear to her that I was done. But there was another part of me, something I hadn't anticipated, that felt curious. Not because I still had feelings for her, but because I wondered what she was really after. After everything, did she really believe she could just come back into my life? I didn't respond right away. Instead, I took a deep breath and thought about it. I knew exactly what this was, the final test. The test to see whether I was truly done with the past. And in that moment, I realized something important. I had nothing left to prove. The next day, I ran into my ex again, this time at a mutual friends gathering. She seemed different, like she had been through some kind of awakening. She approached me, her face soft with a mix of guilt and something I couldn't quite place. "Hey, I just wanted to say, I'm really sorry for everything. For how I treated you," she said. "I know it's been a long time, but I've been working on myself, and I just wanted to apologize." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel any of the anger or frustration I used to. I just felt tired. I had moved on, and I wasn't interested in revisiting that chapter of my life. I appreciate the apology, but it's in the past now, I said, my voice calm and steady. I've learned from everything, and I've moved on. Her eyes seemed to water, but she didn't try to say more. She simply nodded and walked away. As I watched her leave, I realized something. I had finally let go. The emotional weight that had hung over me for so long was gone. There was no more need for closure, no more need for answers. I had everything I needed right in front of me: peace, happiness, and a sense of self that I hadn't had in years. I didn't need to carry her baggage with me anymore. I was free. After that final encounter with my ex, I felt a strange kind of lightness. It was like I had just shed an old skin that no longer fit. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking back. It was as if the weight of everything that had happened, the lies, the betrayal, the emotional manipulation, was no longer mine to carry. I had freed myself from the past, and in doing so, I was finally able to fully embrace the present. It wasn't long before I started noticing things about my new life that I hadn't before. The little things that had always been there but I hadn't been able to see. The joy in a quiet afternoon spent with my girlfriend, who had been nothing but patient and supportive. The freedom to make my own decisions without worrying about someone else's opinions or judgments. I was no longer just reacting to my circumstances. I was creating them. My girlfriend and I continued to grow closer, taking our time, building trust and understanding. We didn't rush anything. It felt good to be with someone who was genuinely kind and straightforward. I started to see how different healthy love could be from the toxic patterns I had gotten used to in the past. With her, I didn't have to worry about dishonesty or manipulation. We communicated openly, and even though we had our disagreements from time to time, there was a mutual respect that made all the difference. It was around this time that I began thinking about the future. Not in a rushed way, but in the sense that I wanted to make sure I was building something solid, not just with my girlfriend, but with myself as well. I wanted to ensure that I wasn't repeating the mistakes of my past. That I wasn't just seeking out love for the sake of not being alone, but because it was something I genuinely wanted, something I knew I deserved. And then, just when I thought I had everything figured out, I got a message from my ex again. I didn't open it immediately. I had learned my lesson from before. I didn't need to rehash the past or try to make sense of things that no longer mattered. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened the message, bracing myself for whatever it was going to be. It was simple. I just wanted to say, I finally understand. You were right. You deserved more than I could give. I hope you find everything you're looking for. That was it. No long-winded apology. No plea for another chance. Just a simple acknowledgement that everything between us had been broken, and she wasn't going to try to fix it. It was almost dignified in a way. I stared at the message for a while, my thumb hovering over the screen. But then I closed it, set the phone down, and didn't think about it again. In that moment, I realized how far I had come. That message didn't affect me the way I thought it might. It didn't open old wounds or stir up feelings I had left behind. Instead, I felt nothing. And in that nothing, I found freedom. I'd like to say that everything after that was perfect. That I lived happily ever after with no more bumps in the road. But life, of course, isn't that simple. There will always be challenges, always be things that test you. But I'd learned something valuable throughout all of this. I was stronger than I realized. I was capable of handling whatever came my way, and I didn't need anyone else to validate me or tell me who I was. I had learned to be comfortable in my own skin. As for my ex, I hope she found what she was looking for. It was clear she was on her own journey, just as I was. Maybe, in time, she'd find peace with her own decisions and actions. But for now, I didn't need to worry about that. I had moved on. I was building a new life. And I was damn proud of it. Looking back, it's hard to believe how much time I wasted holding on to something that wasn't meant to be. I spent years of my life trying to fix a broken relationship, trying to make sense of someone else's actions and lies. But in the end, none of that really mattered. What mattered was me, my growth, my healing, and my ability to move on. I can't say I would do everything the same way if I could go back. I would have cut ties sooner, I would have trusted my gut more, and I would have believed in my worth from the start. But I can say this with certainty, I learned a hell of a lot about myself in the process. If you're reading this and you're stuck in a situation like I was, my advice is simple: stop trying to fix someone else's mistakes. You can't heal them. You can't make them change. You can't force someone to love you the way you deserve. The only person you have control over is yourself. And that's where you need to start. It won't be easy. There will be moments when you feel like you're losing everything, when you feel like you'll never find your way again. But trust me, you will. In time, the pain will fade. You'll look back, and you'll realize how much stronger you are for having survived it. Move forward. Build a life that's yours. And when the right person comes along, someone who's genuinely good for you, let them in. But only after you've let yourself heal first. Only after you've learned how to love yourself. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters most.